mech200. So it's probably our first video. This is going to be a cube twice. We're going to draw the cube to make a point about projections. Kind of boring at first, but we are going to draw two types of cube, or in two different types of projections. We're going to draw one in isometric and another one in diametric. Isometric meaning mono measure, so all the axes are the same, and diametric, there's multiple measurements. It's gonna be somewhat artificial, and we're not gonna follow some exactitude, especially the diametric. So we're just going to be kind of feeling our way along. The intention for me, at least at this point, is to do diametric this semester. In this class, you'll see this green piece of paper here. We're going to use this as a ruler, or a rule, a measuring stick. I do have another piece of it. I tore off. I'm going to use this corner in the diametric later. For now, we're going to draw the isometric. See over on this side. We're going to draw the diametric on this side. We're going to use the same measurement for each, and we'll just learn by doing here. Got two pencils. This is a 0.9 because I'm drawing on quite a large piece of paper. It shows up fairly well in the video. It's not a bad idea to draw big, and this is a B lead, I believe, so a B. I also have a 3mm lead holder, I suppose it was called. Doesn't mechanically advance, which I can use to draw outlines. I have different pencils. So I have a mechanically advancing 2mm somewhere, which you could also use. I'll see if I can see it while we go. Oh, there it is. This is also a B, 2mm, but this is mechanical. It's up to you. Actually, I might use this one. So these are both acceptable. 3mm lead holder, B, 2mm mechanical, B, 0.9, B. I'm using mechanical because I don't have to sharpen them. It's not a big deal. If you want to use a standard normal pencil, nothing wrong with that. So I have some of my own. This is an HB. So whatever you want to use is fine. But if you want to use a pen, you won't be able to erase. Starting off, where's the middle of the page? Say it's about here. A little bit high. You might notice you tend to put the center higher than it really is geometrically. And I'm going to use the eraser. I often don't. We need a unit. We're going to use the same unit for both, just get a relative sizing of how the projection shows the cube. I'm going to go for about 3 fingers. Try and leave some room out here, so you can fit at least 2 or maybe even 3 units on your measuring stick. Here's my unit. 1. It's about 3 fingers for those who really want to know. What's that? 5 centimeters, a couple inches. I'm going to start with so we're working on this side, and we'll do the next one over here. So this will become my refuse area. Put a mark in the middle of this page for the isometric. Now we want a vertical line. Now I'm going to try and draw that first. Try and make it parallel to the edge of the paper, which you can't see, slightly off here. So put the mark on that. One thing about isometric is a very rigid projection. Uses very rigid specifications. The diametric, we're going to draw it in a fairly informal way. The isometric kind of dictates formality. You want the first line, the first bottom edge of the cube to be 30 degrees. So let's do a little thumbnail here. So in order, what we're going to do is what we've just drawn. We're going to draw a bunch of equilateral triangles, 6 of them. We're going to discover that it turns into a hexagon. It's really bad. From there, we're going to discover the cube inside of it. And then we'll cross hatch it. So we'll talk about the sun and talk about how to show kind of a three-dimensionality through cross-hatching, which is a fairly, you can do this while you're watching TV. That's the plan for the isometric. So we just drew this line. Need some isometric, equilateral triangles. Anyway, so we can try for the 30, right? So, okay, maybe it's like so. 30 from the horizontal, 60 from the vertical. Let's see how well we did. Equilateral triangles, equal angle. Oh, not bad. Shocker. Best I've done all day. So let's connect that guy together. If you don't do well, let's do a bad one next. So I need my next triangle moving from the next point. Say I'm way off. There's my guess. I'll find that oh, right. See, the dots are not, the edges are not lining up. So we kind of move in arcs, trying to get a little bit more accurate. So there's my second dot. And join these two lines together. Resist the urge to use a ruler. Now, I would like to save some time, not necessarily use this as a ruler, but use it as a guide. If I do this, if I put the 0 to 1 unit here, I can find the second unit further down. So 0, 1, 2, that allows me to put the dots in space just right away, which is great. So there's our dots. You can do it in order. It doesn't really matter what order you do it in, but to be thorough. No. You can either erase, which I'm going to do here because it's quite dark. If you draw light first, just leave it and just draw over the top. You'll see me quite often just drawing right over. Sorry, the angle is, this paper is taped to the table. I can't move very well here. I'm right-handed, so you tend to see me, the shadow. I'm contort around here, connecting up all the edges. Now, if you've got a really steady hand, and I've had too much coffee for that, you can draw it in one line. Again, we'll give it a go. Sometimes it helps to try and get your hand ready and then try and draw it in one. That's not working. So it's up to you. The sort of standard approach is to try and draw it in one line and not worry too much about weaviness and all that sort of stuff. It'll get hidden as you go along. It's up to you. There's our isometric equilateral triangles turning into an isometric, and we can discover the cube inside of here. This can be quite good. So for example, half a cube, you find the middle and you just half it in two. Right? There's a lot of advantages to it. The disadvantage is quite a lot of construction and the angles are quite picky. However, one thing to notice here are collections of parallel lines. These are parallel in space or in the real object. And they're parallel in the sketch. Isometric is good that way. It gives you a nice set of sort of regular, in a cube anyway, regular edges which are all parallel. So there's our first set. There's another set, the verticals. Now, what we've already done now is decided which way we're looking at the cube. We're looking down on it, because I can see this edge. If I darken this diamond, it's as if we'd be looking up underneath the cube. It's fairly normal to look down on the top, because we tend to walk around looking down. It's just our habits, I suppose. So there's our cube, discovered inside of a hexagon, which is constructed of 6 equilateral triangles, all with a measuring stick. Now, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to come back and shade this in the second video, but for now, or should we do it now? Let's do it now. We have a sun usually, so a point of view. So in the thumbnail up here, we might have a sun somewhere up here, looking down, as suns tend to do at the cube. Sorry, it's almost off screen. So we're going to put the sun somewhere up here. My little mediocre sun. So the light source is kind of up to the left or right. For an active shade, you want to have it not in the center line, one side or the other. We are also going to do a very simplified shading or toning exercise here. For those who have done this in, say, an art class or rendering class, or know about shading or shadows, reserve your judgment. We're going to be using fairly, well, ultra simple approach here. We're going to do 3 tones. The tone which is facing the sun closest, so for example, the top here, is the lightest. The tone, or the area, in this case the face, facing the furthest away from the sun will be the darkest, and then the intermediate in between. We'll extend this a little bit later when we're drawing cylinders and vague shapes, like organic shapes. We'll also start introducing much more complex shading or hatching. For this one, we're just going to do ultra basic hatching here, just to get an idea that we can actually hatch, not this ugly, but something similar. The first thing I tend to do in this case is cover the whole thing with a very light hatch in a direction on the axes. We're going to just draw the right over the top. Don't get upset because we're going to do it right through the whole thing. Right now you're thinking, oh God, I've ruined all my good work. Well, we're going to hide all this stuff, try and keep it parallel. Now, that's really ugly, but this gives us a guide for doing the hatching on top of that. So what I'm going to do here is, with the same pencil, just do a very light hatch along those guides. It's really boring. It's good for you. It's good for all of us. You can do it while we're watching TV. Passerbys are impressed if you're at the coffee shop. Parental units are kind of, okay. And you can keep this quite light, quite easy, and I'm not pushing very hard at all. So maybe going back and forth a bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, and I'm also slightly rotating the pencil to keep the sharp edge. There's a sharp edge kind of into the paper. If you don't do that, you get quite a thick line, which is fine later. For now, I want a thinner line. And it's boring, so I'm going to stop talking. Some ugly hatch. It's fine. Again, we're just trying to represent shape here, so I'm not doing realistic. We're not doing unicorn eyes with tears. I'm not going to show realism. We've got 3D modeling and rendering and computers for that stuff now. Nor are we doing the art. It's just simple rendering of a cube. Almost there. Bigger hatch line here. That's our lightest. So what I want to do on this next one, which is the furthest away from the sun, so lightest, darkest, intermediate, I want to be this quite dark here. I'm going to take my pencil and lean quite hard, well, not hard, not ripping the paper, but quite a bit harder, and maybe even closer as I go through this face. Ideally, I only have to do this once, but if we get to the end and discover, oh, it's not really that great, we might end up darkening this one a little bit more. We'll see how it goes. The problem with isometric, as you can see here, is it tends to emphasize all the faces, so they're all the same size. Tedious. I'm also not rotating the pencil here, so letting it get quite thick and pressing fairly heavily. Sorry, grammar's gone. I'm also trying not to smudge it too much, so I'm working from top to bottom. It will get smudged on the next face. Getting a little bit of cramping, it's good for us. Tenacity, character, all that stuff. Trying to keep that blunt edge down. Sorry, that's what I'm looking at there. Now the reason for the 0.9 starts to become a little bit apparent. I can lean on this fairly heavily, not hard, but heavily without it snapping off. The smaller leads tend to snap easy. There's our, potentially the dark. Now, I've got this intermediate here. I might want to actually give myself some extra help here, maybe aim it across the other way. Oh, all over the place. So I'm just going to use these ones, no need to erase the other ones. So an intermediate, let's do a little test here. Looking on camera, it's not bad, there's a little light at front, so let's do that. So trying to hold this is quite hard. It's quite close to this guy. So thicker, but not as heavy on the push or the pressure. I've got a fairly hard table so you can hear me. I'm not whacking this too hard. Getting kind of ugly. My cramp is now solid in my thumb. Somewhere in here. It's not making its way out towards my thumbnail yet. Nor is it going up my arm soon. Two here, kind of screwed up my hatches here. It's fine. Just hide that like it didn't happen. Once you get a rhythm, you'll find that you can kind of join them together almost. Cramping now. You can, if you want, go from an edge. You're going to be erasing around this anyway later, so it doesn't really matter how you go. But just coming up for this last row. Let's have a look. These two are fairly similar. This one is, I think, clearly lighter. This one is not dark enough. I'm going to use the heavier, bigger pencil and actually just do some diagonal hatching right through the existing hatch. Now, don't go so dark if you do this to actually eliminate or hide what you've already done. You want to just add a little extra hatch across the top to darken it to the point where you can see the darkest, medium, and lightest tones, which gives it a sort of a three-dimensionality to the viewer. We're all used to looking at these sorts of things, so we can see that this kind of says cube now, I hope. Maybe. That's now darker. If you do have a pencil or a darker pencil, it's quite common to add the edges back in just to emphasize them if you want. You can use that one. You can also go back to your original. Because this is sharper, it'll kind of make a smaller, darker line. One thing that I have a habit of doing, some people have told me off for this, is to actually put a darker line around the whole thing. For those who are in the know, very illustratory thing. It does help when we're sketching like assemblies. We can show sub-assemblies and larger assemblies. It's entirely up to you. And again, the difficult angle for me. Sorry if I hit the camera. Ooh, ugly. No, got all this stuff around it. You can either use your measuring stick or an eraser shield if you have one. If it's small enough for the eraser shield, that's fair. Normally you just kind of lightly run the eraser along the edge of it, so kind of pushing in towards the shield. You can see it works reasonably well. It does also straighten off some janky edge here that I've got. So again, depending on how you're arranged. Don't bother trying to pretend it's not a hand sketch, so you don't need to get rid of everything. You can see the smudge here. This is okay. Smudging is coming. We'll have a go at it later in future sketches. For now, I'm not officially smudging, but if there is some smudges, just take the edge off them. Oop. The eraser shield's a bit bent. Sorry, erasing shield. There's our cube. This is isometric. We're going to do the same thing over here, but in dimetric. We'll take a pause in the video and go over to the next one for that. But for now, thanks for watching, and we will be moving on to cube number 2, the dimetric.